In this video you will learn about the key features of Kant's deontological ethics and consider important issues relating to Kant's thinking. The Enlightenment refers to a movement that began in the 18th century Germany, in which philosophers and theologians began thinking in a rational way about reason and morality. Immanuel Kant, who was born in 1724 and died in 1804, is a key figure of this movement. Kant wrote an article on the Enlightenment, stating, "Have the courage to use one's own reason." Kant believed that humans are free to make rational choices because of their ability to rationalize, which makes them different to animals. This ability gives human beings their value or dignity. If our choices were not free, we could not be moral agents. Kant was concerned with actions rather than consequences, making him a deontologist. He believed that if an act is wrong, it is wrong in itself, in all situations. Kant's theory is based on the duty to obey moral law. We should not be sidetracked by feelings or inclinations. It is not our duty to do things we cannot do, so if we say we ought to do something, it implies we can do it. Kant believed that people seek an end, which is the supreme good. He believed that it is not possible to achieve this in one lifetime, so he believed in an immortal soul. His ethical argument assumes God's existence. For Kant, morality leads to God. Kant believed there is an objective moral law, and we know it through reason. Kant thought that knowledge can be known either with reference to experience or without. Knowledge after experience is a posteriori, and knowledge without experience is called a priori knowledge. There are two further categories of knowledge. It may be analytic, which means that it is necessarily true, such as 1 + 1 = 2. We don't need any further facts to check if it's true. This is a priori analytic knowledge. And there is synthetic knowledge, which requires empirical tests. An example is, Jack is a footballer. This is not necessarily true, and we would have to find out by experience. This is a posteriori synthetic knowledge. However, moral statements don't come under either of these two categories. For Kant, they must be a priori, because we can't prove what someone should do by looking. Moral statements are produced by reason. However, moral statements may be right or wrong. They are not necessarily true. Therefore, ethical statements are a priori synthetic statements. They are knowable through reason, not experience, and may or may not be true. Kant argues that the highest form of good is goodwill. To have a good will is to do one's duty. Doing one's duty is performing actions that are morally required and avoiding those which are morally ruled out. Morality is an obligation to act. To perform a good action for a good consequence is doing it out of self-interest and is not morally good, for Kant. We don't do our duty because of the consequences, but because we ought to do it unconditionally. It is good in itself. Kant's system is based on reason, not intuition, and means that a moral person must be a rational person. Being a good person means having a good will. In other words, doing your duty for the sake of duty alone. Kant proposed the idea of the categorical imperative to help decide which actions are obligatory. If something is good in itself, then it is a categorical imperative. It is absolute and must be followed. If it is hypothetical, it is not just good in itself, but seeks another end. It is a hypothetical imperative. Is the statement, "I ought to tell the truth," categorical or hypothetical? For Kant, all categorical imperatives are universal. They do not refer only to particular cultures, times, or places. They are for everyone, at all times. This is the idea of universal law. Kant believed we should always treat other human beings as an end in themselves. We should never use another human being for another purpose. They have a dignity and a value which sets them apart. The categorical imperative binds every human to a set of rules that apply to everyone and command respect for human life. Kant makes a distinction between duty and inclination. Morality is more than personal preference. What we want may not reflect what we ought to do. Kant would not allow innocent people to be harmed for the benefit of the majority. Human beings are intrinsically valuable. They are to be treated as ends in themselves, not as means to an end. The moral value of an action is intrinsic. However, this approach gives a strict set of rules, allowing for no exceptions. Also, in some situations, duties are in conflict, and following Kant makes it very difficult to choose which duty should be followed, as all duties are categorically imperative. There is also an issue with universalizing any one set of rules across different cultures, societies, and times. Some people have argued that Kant gives too much authority to the individual to decide what their duty is based on their reason. They think Kant is too optimistic about human reasoning abilities.